Hey guys, Trev here from SpineWise. Today I want to talk to you about vitamin D and why it is so important, especially coming into winter. And this is really important if you're someone who's suffering with blood sugar handling problems, stress-related issues, neuromuscular problems, chronic pain, all these type of things, then this is going to be really, really important for you. But especially those who, you're feeling a little bit flat and maybe you get annual tests and your blood vitamin D levels are a little bit low, but you're not too sure what that means this time of the year. All right, so before we get into it, I'll talk about the fine details about what you can do and how you can deal with things and what normal is and all that kind of stuff later on. But I just want to speak to you initially about how does vitamin D actually get produced, because everyone has this belief that this thing's a vitamin, but it actually isn't a vitamin at all. So the term vitamin really means vital amines, and this is really derived for things that we need to have in our diet all the time in order to keep ourselves alive. And there are tons of things that have lost their vitamin status. For example, biotin is a B vitamin. It used to be called a vitamin, it was vitamin B7. We now know that our gut bacteria produce it in a nice, healthy manner. So we don't actually need to get it from our food in order to survive, hence it's no longer a vital amine. So vitamin D is one of these substances as well, and you all probably know or have heard that you get it from the sun, which is not exactly correct. I'm going to talk about that. But really what we now know is that it's actually what we call a prohormone. That's what we get. So the way it behaves is more like a hormone, and that's exactly what it is these days. We refer to it as a hormone, no longer as a vitamin. So it's lost this term, but I'm going to use the term vitamin D throughout this, just so that you guys can understand a little bit clearer. All right, so let's have a look through how this works. So to start with, cholesterol, we have this layer of cholesterol or fat in our skin, and this is where our production of vitamin D actually starts. So this layer of fat in the skin, or a special type of cholesterol that's in the skin, gets converted to a substance known as D3. So D3 is kind of our basic level of vitamin D. It's the stuff that you also get from your supplements is D3. The stuff we get from our food is D2, and it's not converted very well into actual vitamin D that we use, which we'll get to in a second. So this process though, you cannot produce something from light. You can't produce a physical or biochemical substance from light. That just doesn't happen. The physics don't allow that, okay? So there's this myth that you get vitamin D from the sun, and that's actually complete rubbish. That's not the case at all. We don't get vitamin D from the sun. But what we do is vitamin D, the sunlight, specifically a very, very specific wavelength of sunlight, comes down, hits the skin and acts as a catalyst to activate the production of vitamin D. So it's the same way if you have a block of ice and you put a flame underneath it to heat it, eventually it melts and turns into water. The flame doesn't produce water, it just allows it to act like a catalyst to speed up the conversion of ice to water. And this is what the sunlight does. So this area here to start with, this is where the sun really comes into it. This is how the sun has an effect on our production. Now, as I was saying a second ago, it's all about the wavelength of sunlight you get. So the actual specific wavelength of sun that you need to produce vitamin D, to activate the cascade, only occurs when the sun is above your head. So it needs to be more than 45 degrees in the sky. So this is really, really important for us. So a very easy thing to remember is you'll only produce vitamin D when your shadow is shorter than you. Okay, so that's when the sun's higher. So if you look down and your shadow is shorter than you, you're producing vitamin D. If you're not, then you won't. And athletes fall into this trap all the time because they train early in the morning, they train in the afternoon, so they have enough recovery between sessions, and then they don't understand why they're not producing vitamin D because they're always in the sun. So it's all about the time that you spend in the sun. So if you're indoors working, make sure you get out during the day, because you need to actually get out to get the sun when it's above your head. Okay, so this is still not the vitamin D we use, and it's not the vitamin D you test for with your labs either. So the next step is this D3 and D2 then gets converted and undergoes a process known as hydroxylation in the liver, and that hydroxylation adds this OH minus group to it, and this produces our 25-OHD, and this is our stored form. Okay, this is what you test for on your blood test, the stored form of vitamin D. So this is all done by our liver. Okay, so those of you who have liver problems, liver disease, things like that, most of the time these people will have problems with vitamin D, not necessarily because they're not getting enough sun or because their diets are bad, but just because the liver can't actually activate it. They can't produce it effectively, which is a really, really big problem for a lot of people. The final step then, this is our stored vitamin D. This is still not what we use on a somewhat regular basis in the human body. The next step is we convert this 25-OHD into the active form of vitamin D, the form we use, which is known as 1,2,5 vitamin D. And this is because the vitamin D gets hydroxylated again, but this time in the kidney. So those who have kidney disease, they're often having problems with this activated form of 1,2,5-D. And then it's used by going into what we call a vitamin D receptor. And that receptor is really, really critical because that receptor is the one thing that actually switches on all of our cells. So we can see there's a lot of moving parts to producing vitamin D. It's not just a matter of getting sun. It's a matter of getting sun at the right time of the day, then having really good liver function, and then having good healthy kidneys in order to actually produce it. And we can go a little bit further again as well with that and talk about the receptors itself. And we have genetic mutations can affect receptors. There's certain infections, which we can talk about another day, which will also affect this as well. So it's a very big cascade going through there. So why is this so important? Where is this actually used? Because we use this right around the human body. So some of the key areas are our immune system. And we've heard a lot of talk with the viruses over the last 2 years that have been happening around about vitamin D and the importance of it in terms of viral immunity and things like this. And the big part of it is our innate immune system. This is like our initial, it's a bit simplified, but our initial activation, like our initial flight or fight response from our immune system to try and protect you. And it's really used to activate that and to switch it on, which is why vitamin D is so important for good immune health. Our brain, we have receptors right throughout the human brain to help the human brain function with vitamin D. We know it can be affected by, it can affect mental health and a whole lot of different things. Some of that is vitamin D directly. Some of that's just the sunlight itself, which stimulates serotonin, which is a little bit different. But we know both of these two things are really critical in terms of keeping our human body and our mental health good. Next one is our bone health. So our parathyroids are affected by this, and this basically looks after our calcium regulation, and that calcium regulation is also important for bone health as well. And we know once you start dropping below about 50 units, we start running the risk of developing bone conditions like osteoporosis. And the interesting one that most people aren't aware of is blood sugar. So we know that there's a close correlation between insulin resistance and vitamin D deficiency. So there's some belief and some thought that the actual vitamin D receptors inside the beta cells inside your pancreas, and that vitamin D actually helps with the production of insulin and the function with all that as well. So what are the key signs that we're looking for with vitamin D deficiency? Because there's a whole lot of them. I'm just going to really keep them really simple for now. So at the top of the list that we just spoke about, type 2 diabetes, not type 1. There is some suggestion that there may be some links between that in early childhood and type 1 diabetes, but it's a little bit not really secure yet. We know there's a definite link between type 2 diabetes and vitamin D deficiencies. Obesity, there's another one. So we know vitamin D and obesity seem to go quite well hand in hand. How they fit, not sure. It could be through the insulin resistance thing from diabetes, but we do need to take care in terms of if we are overweight, it could be an idea to get your vitamin D levels checked. Calcium and magnesium deficiencies, and this is just basically because vitamin D is important in helping for absorption through the gut of calcium and magnesium. So quite often we may find that magnesium deficiency is actually secondary to a vitamin D problem itself, which is a big thing because we know magnesium is used in so many different enzymes within the human body. Neuromuscular irritability. So there's a whole lot of different things under this state. And what we're really looking for is muscular contraction, muscular pain. These type of things are very closely associated again with vitamin D deficiencies. And of course, as we spoke about before, any kind of bone softening type conditions such as osteomalacia, osteoporosis, osteopenia, these type of things we should really be assessing for vitamin D deficiencies as well. All right, so what are our ideal levels? So we're coming into winter, so this is what we're going to talk about here now in regards to what do we need to have right now heading into June where winter's about to kick into place. So what we know in Melbourne at least is that once you drop below a certain level in terms of your latitude on the planet, further south, north a bit differently in the northern hemisphere, once you get below a certain level, the sun doesn't actually ever come above 45 degrees anymore. And if it doesn't get above 45 degrees, your shadow is never shorter than you, which means you physically cannot produce vitamin D. In Melbourne, we're roughly around the 37, 30 degree south mark. So when we get down to that level, what we know is in July and August, it's almost impossible to produce vitamin D. We just don't have enough sun high enough in the sky. Not saying we're not blue enough. We do have, like last year, we had an amazingly blue winter, I should say. But it's just about the sun not getting up high enough, so we don't get that level of wavelength of the light that we need in order to stimulate vitamin D. So we want to make sure that our levels are up somewhere around the 70 mark heading into winter. So this is the time to go get them checked. If you haven't had them checked, to go get your levels checked and see what they are right now. Because if you're 50 or below, you definitely need to be supplemented over winter. If you're around the 70 mark, you'll probably be able to get away with it, and we can recheck your levels come spring or spring or summer to see exactly where your level's at, to work out whether or not you are fine for the summer months. But if we're below the 50 mark, we definitely, or even in the 50s, we definitely need to start looking at supporting these people over winter. If you're up in the 70, 80 mark, you're probably going to be fine. You shouldn't have a drama over winter, and we can just see how you are on the other side. So the next question we often get asked when we start talking about this is, what do we need to supplement with? Because it seems like there's so many different forms of vitamin D on the market nowadays. So there are a few key things that we are aware of. So the first one is the the D3 version of vitamin D is fat soluble. Now this is a fat-based vitamins. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are all fat-based. So these are things that absorb with fat. So you don't want to be taking solid tablets and drinking them down with water. They're just not going to absorb very, very well. So some of the really good brands nowadays are producing vitamin D as oils, and you can just basically put a couple of drops on your tongue or something like that, or lick them off your back of your hand, and then take them with a little bit of oil or something like that to aid absorption. There are some brands now though that are producing a slightly different form of vitamin D, which is more like the 25-OHD, which is great because it kind of bypasses the liver. So if you do have liver dysfunction, it's not going to be as apparent. So you can get your levels up, and these seem to be getting people's levels up much, much quicker than what the other D3s, basic D3 supplements do. There is a little bit of conjecture about how and how much and how or why, and even some argument whether it is the case or not, but there seems to be some early evidence to suggest that from what we've been advised as well. So we can supplement with this, we can supplement with this nowadays, but the big key thing is to make sure that if your levels are in the 50s or below, you really do need to be supplementing over winter just to try and protect yourself and get you going right. And if we do have issues, make sure we're looking at not just are we getting enough sun and is our diet right, but we also need to make sure that our liver function is healthy, kidney function is healthy, all those detoxification pathways are functioning right in order to allow you to actually produce the vitamin D to begin with. Okay. Anyway guys, that's a quick look into vitamin D and its effect on us as human beings and what we really should be looking for heading into winter. If you have any questions at all, just post them up. Please remember to like our page, subscribe. We love having people on here. We love having chats with you as well as we get through all this stuff and answering all the questions that we get every week. So thank you so much for being brave enough to ask us the questions that you had. If you do have a question you're not too certain and you don't want to post it up, just find this, send me a message. We're always happy to chat and help you out in any way we can. Anyway guys, if you have any questions, post them up or send me a question. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next vid. Bye for now.